2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
She was tear-gassed and beaten.
Images of thousands desperate to escape Taliban oppression filled our news feeds. More than 80,000 Afghans made it to America. But the story didn't end there.
It was very cold. There was no power, no heat.
Who would help our newest neighbors? I'm Andrea Smartin. In Stranger Becomes Neighbor, you'll hear the stories of some remarkable refugees who left their homes and their dreams behind, only to start over from zero.
Their only possession was 3 blankets.
And you'll meet Americans who stepped up to help them.
You want me to come when you deliver your baby.
What can one person do in the face of an international disaster decades in the making? That's Stranger Becomes Neighbor. Find us at kslpodcast.com. Follow us on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, a podcast about recovery. I'm Casey Scott, and my road to recovery started with Pinnacle Recovery Center. If you know somebody who could use some help, tell them to do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery a call. Of course, we've got Dr. Matt Woolley here. He's the yin to my raging yang. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you doing, Casey?
Now, normally we do a check-in with Casey, but when you got Hollywood A-listers in studio, you just you jump past that and you jump right to them.
You're like our local A-lister, but when we get the Hollywood A-listers in, that
bumps me down to a C.
No, B minus. Max.
B minus?
Yeah.
I'll take whatever I can get. But we got Brandon Novack. How are you, buddy?
You guys are too kind, too gracious, honestly. You set the bar way too high.
Right?
Now you expect things out of me. That's not good.
That's how we psych him out.
Brandon Novack, you might know him from Viva La Bam, the Jackass movies, and more importantly, you're going to know him more for his work in recovery. And you're here doing a big event Saturday night at Pier Pump Place. And we're going to kind of talk with you. I'm going to talk a little bit, and we've got Court McGee. But before we get to that, let's find out kind of your story, if you don't mind. How did it all kind of transpire for you?
Yeah, a quick preface before I get into that. I want to say how much I really love Utah. I've been here before many times in my past, but completely loaded, and it was all a blur. But I had came Halloween to speak at a CA meeting, and they flew me out, and it was a costume contest, and just the vibe of the people there and these young people in recovery was very appealing to me, and I'm really big on attraction rather than promotion. Right, because I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, and all that simply means is I'm defiant by nature. I hate authority, and I will never, ever, ever conform unless it becomes my idea. Therefore, you tell me what I need to do. I tell you I need to f*** off because I possess this job that consists of knowing everything.
Right.
But if I can wrap this up into a present with a bow that's in a form of attraction rather than promotion, and you make it look very sexy, appealing, all of a sudden now I want to do it, and guess what? I excel at a rapid pace. Why? Because it's my idea. So I don't know why I went to that whole rabbit hole, but when I was out here for the CA convention, they flew me out to speak. The young people in Utah made recovery look very attractive to me, very appealing. So when Jody asked me if I'd be interested to come out to Utah again, I didn't even hesitate to say absolutely.
You're in.
Yeah, because I like how you guys do that here.
That's some good psychology, though. The attraction is much more sustainable than promotion, right?
You know what? It was
when people
weird.
are attracted to something positive.
Yeah.
I was listening to him speak, and I say that about my addiction. If somebody told me I couldn't do something, I was like, watch, I'll show you.
Yeah.
And I will drink more than anybody, and I would win that. And if somebody says, you can't stay sober, watch, I'll show you I can stay sober, and I'll get it back. But it has to be my idea.
It has to be.
And I think that's, I on this show and this podcast, I always talk about my recovery because it's unique to me.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm doing, and it seems to be working for me. So before we get to your recovery, how did you go down this dark road? I mean, because a lot of people probably looked at you and said, this kid's got everything. They're doing TV shows. They're doing movies. He's a talented skater. How did you get bit by this addiction?
Yeah, my opinion, and that's just what it is, my opinion, but I believe I was genetically predisposed, right? My father was an addict. His father was an addict. I'm the only son by my father. My brother and sister are by a different man. My mother, my brother, my sister, they could take or leave a drink. They could care less about it. I believe I was genetically predisposed. Now, you pair that with the concept that I was very talented at a young age. I found a skill that was God-giving to me. That the moment that I got that skateboard at the age of 7, my mother put me to bed that night. She said, "Brandon, what do you want me to do with the skateboard?" I said, "I want it in bed with me." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because if I die, I want it to come with me." It was like I knew the moment that board touched my hand, I was going to be a professional skateboarder. It was like God had handed me the Holy Grail personally. I ate it, I breathed it, I slept it, I dreamt it. At 15, I became a professional skateboarder. I was designing my pro model for Powell Peralta. I was touring the world with Tony Hawk. At the age of 14, I was the first skateboarder ever in the world to be endorsed by Gatorade, and they were flying me to Chicago to the Quaker Oats building where they made Gatorade at the time. They put me on one treadmill, and they put Michael Jordan on a treadmill next to me, and they'd strap all these wires to our hearts and put these tubes like down our noses and in our throats to give us each Gatorade to see the effects it has on different sports players. So from that very young age, skateboarding did for me then what drugs and alcohol did for me later. Right? Because you give me that skateboard at the age of 7 and put me in a room with the prettiest models in the world, I'll not only think that they were waiting for me, I'll think that they are dying to marry me. Right? Drugs did that for me later.
Yeah.
But I had goals, I had dreams, I had aspirations. Right? A lot of years I would go in and out of treatment centers, and I was so worried about saving my face. Right? Because everything was exterior. I really believed that social acceptability equaled my personal recovery. So as long as the home was big enough, the woman was pretty enough, the car was new enough, the account was high enough, that meant that I had to be doing well. And I would go into these treatment centers and I would save my face because I didn't want to tell you like the things that I had done for heroin, because what if you think I'm gay? Or what if you think I'm a loser or a failure? I would save my face, only to literally lose my ass on the corner of Eastern Avenue and Patterson Park for $40 for another bag. So what happened, the only motivating factor that dictates any form of change in my life is a result of pain. I don't change when things are unmanageable. I change when things are unbearable. So what happened is that the pain got great enough that I became willing to follow whatever suggestions that you people gave me, and then all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I focused on saving my ass. And when I focused on saving my ass and my face correlated somewhere along the lines. So my story is my story, and I'm glad you asked this because it's not a black and white one-size-fits-all. If that were the case, I would have got it at my first treatment center at the age of 17. I didn't get it to my 13th at 35. So my story is I had goals, I had dreams, I had aspirations. I didn't come from a bad home. My mother's a nuclear physicist on the board of Mercy Hospital. My brother's an attorney in the White House who practices pensions and benefits. My father died as a direct result of the disease of addiction. He never held a job a day in his life. He ran with the Hells Angels. He taught me one thing: if and when I go to prison, how to conduct myself. So I actually excelled at everything that I did because I was never going to become my father. I really disliked that man. So it's not like I suffered from these traumatic experiences that once I picked up that first drink, I said, I have arrived. It's not my story. It's not my case. But the reality is I can't tell you about the first time I picked up that drink and I said, I found my calling. What I can tell you about is the first time that my drinking and my drugging was threatened. I can tell you about that. And that is almost more important than the first drink, because right there, in hindsight, looking back, that defined my future. And what that means is that, like, I'm an addict and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the next one. I didn't know that when it took place, but it actually happened through Mike Vallely.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. He
professional skateboarder?
Yeah. You know, he threatened my drinking career, my drugging career. And
Tell us about it.
So I was on one of my first tours, and we were doing a demo. And now this time I had already picked up the drinking and partying, but it just didn't seem to be an issue.
It probably wasn't that uncommon.
No,
right?
you know, I'm a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid touring, doing tours with skaters that are 18, 19, 23, 24, 25.
And just for the listeners, I mean, the skaters that you were skating with were the world-famous rock stars of the sport. Steve Caballero, Mike Vallely, Tony Hawk, Mike McGill. Those kind of guys were just, I mean, that must have been unreal for you.
Yeah. You know, I had... my dream had became reality, and there was really no accountability, right? It's not like I had a boss that I checked in with every day who witnessed or monitored my work throughout the day in an office cubicle from 9 to 5. My accountability, my check-in was living in Baltimore. The team manager, the team captain, if you will, lived in Santa Barbara. I'd call him and tell him the new tricks that I learned. And
Is that
occasionally,
Stacy?
No, at this time it was Todd Hastings.
Okay,
Stacy
all right.
Peralta owned pal. Todd Hastings was the
was
team
team
manager.
right? Okay.
So that was like my babysitter.
Yeah.
I didn't have a boss that had said, "Hey, here's my work," and I made it to work by 8 a.m. I didn't have to be in when the street lights were on.
Right.
You know, I was raised by the dudes that I ran with, and that was a much better reality than the reality that I had home because my father was a rather unsavory fella. He ran with the Hells Angels, and he was that kind of guy. You know,
Probably
so,
felt more like a family with those guys you were running with. Right?
Yeah, my mother was working her butt off to provide for the family because it was a single mother family. My brother was busy becoming a lawyer. My sister was like going to college and living down the beach. And my mother would take me with her during the days because no one really trusted what my father would do, and anything was subject to happen. So I was raised in a hospital. I would skate in the parking lot, the parking garages all day. I'd just kind of roam around, and they all looked
You
out
probably
for
knew
me.
all the security guards.
I did, absolutely. They never kicked me out. It was
Yeah.
a sure shot for a skate sesh.
So you're saying at 10, you're traveling with these world superstars in the skating world, and when you're out there, you're a superstar. And,
Yeah.
And so you're hanging with guys 7 to 8 years older than you.
Yeah.
And but you're partying with them and hanging with them.
Yeah, and so somewhere along the lines, and I can't recall it because it wasn't like my defining moment as an individual in life. I had acquired, a liking for drugs, right? And I remember we were on that tour, and Mike Vallely found me and caught me with a bunch of drugs. He said, "Brandon, get rid of the drugs or get off the tour." So I throw the drugs down the sewer. We finish the demo. I get back to the hotel. I meet a lady at the hotel. She drives me back to the sewer. I fish the drugs out of the sewer. Long story short, I get caught with the drugs. I'm now kicked off.
How old were you at that time?
That was I'm kicked off the tour. I'm not kicked
Yeah.
off the team yet. That was around 15 going on
Okay.
16.
Vallely, he's from Baltimore too, right?
No, he's from Jersey.
Jersey,
Neighboring
okay, all
state.
right,
Yeah, but same kind of East
But
Coast.
he has that kind of big brother vibe to him, right?
Yeah. And so now, see, paired with the fact that I possess this job that consists of knowing everything, usually that means I'm the last person to find or realize anything because you can't tell me anything. My delusional alcoholic brain, the very same brain that lies to me in my own voice that makes me believe the unbelievable, tells me the skateboarding world needs me, it cannot go on without me, and I am an asset.
Yeah.
In reality, the skateboarding world does not need me. It goes on quite fine without me, and I'm a liability, but I'm the last person to realize that because I possess that job that consists of knowing everything.
Yep.
So now, about 3 weeks into this, I get a phone call from Tony Hawk, my higher power at the time, the guy who's given me a reason to live. He said, "Brandon, we have one of two options we could do with you. We can put you into treatment, you can save your life, and you continue to be a pro skater for PAL, or you can quit the team." Now, from 7 to 15, I ate it, I breathed it, I slept it, I dreamt it. I knew I was going to become it. There was no reason for a school, a plan B, a trait, an option. Like, skateboarding was my calling, and I had arrived. I had achieved my goals.
At such a young age.
At a young age.
It's incredible.
I mean, that's all I ever wanted. And the first moment that it was threatened by Mr. Hawk, I didn't have a breath of fresh air in my lungs when I said I quit. Because what I didn't know then that I understand now is at that point in time and in the continuing career of my drinking and drugging, I shied away from conversations that consist of the words honest, reliable, or dependable because they do not help me get one more. And you'll hear in this brief interview tomorrow at my talk that anything, and I mean anything between me and that next bag, bottle, or pill must and will go, and it's not personal. It's just business.
So you're telling the listeners at 15, you're a pro skater for Pal Peralta, biggest skateboard companies in the world. You tell Tony Hawk, I quit.
Yep.
For your drugs.
Yeah. But I didn't even
That's incredible,
realize
man.
it. I didn't even realize it. This thing had its grips in me long
Yeah.
before I even realized that I might have a problem.
Yeah, I bet, and I think that's a lot of people who look back on their addiction and how they used. They lack that self-awareness of what's really going on. I mean, that's a tremendous amount.
I was so internally unique. It could
Yeah.
never happen to me.
Yeah.
It will never happen to me.
This
I've learned-
happens to other people. This doesn't happen
Yeah.
to me. I'm a 17-year-old superstar.
Absolutely. I can do what I want. I've been successful to this point. There's a method to my madness. And that was even worse, actually, because people didn't really intervene or interject, if you will, because, hey, I had been successful to this point anyway.
He knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's drinking Gatorade with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
So-
hanging out at a steakhouse.
When
eating
you
steaks.
tell Tony Hawk, I quit, is there any pushback, or does he just go, okay?
I don't even remember. I don't even recall. I just remember feeling a sigh of relief.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you would hang up the phone and go,
No.
what did I just do?
No, because already, and I didn't even think about that until this interview. Already at that young age, the abnormal had started to become the normal.
Oh.
And I don't even know it then. I never even thought about that till just now. I recognize it was very easily recognizable way later down the line.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm sleeping in abandoned houses, I have a needle hanging out of my arm and I sell my body for a bag of heroin. Then I get the abnormals, the normal. I'm living on the animalistic level. But at that young age, when I still had everything, the abnormal was already becoming the normal because my drinking and drugging was threatened.
So at 17, you tell Tony Hawk, I'm out.
Yeah.
Then where does Brandon go?
Well, ironically enough, I turned down his offer to go to rehab, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm living with my mother and my girlfriend. Tours are no longer being booked. Flights are no longer being scheduled. Video parts are no longer being produced. Why? Because those consist of me having to have those conversations. They consist of the words honest, reliable, or dependable, right? And I shy from that because that doesn't help me. So now I'm doing nothing. And one day my mother and my girl come and they said, we have a great idea. I said, what's that? They said, we want you to go to treatment. Now, I had just politely declined this offer from my idol, Mr. Tony Hawk, 3 months ago. But I look at him, and in all seriousness, I say, that is a phenomenal idea. A, I have the time. B, I'm going to report to said treatment center, and I'll report back to my mother and my girlfriend why I'm not those people, nor will I ever be.
So you were going just to prove everybody wrong.
Yes. Overreaction at best. You simply caught me at a bad time on a bad way and a bad day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go into that facility with a closed mind and a closed heart, proving a point why I'm not buying what you're selling. I'll never drink your Kool-Aid.
And so you're kind of going in there and not really paying attention, and you're not there for the right reasons.
Oh man, you made great segue into this part right here. I go in there and I'm 17 years old. They put me in my first facility in Baltimore City. It's a Wednesday night. I'm ill as a research monkey. I'm detoxing off heroin. They put me in this big cafeteria, and in this cafeteria, it's completely empty. There's no one in there. They got these big, interrogation-style lights shining down in my face and on me. And out of nowhere, this older black gentleman walks up to me. He said, white boy, what are you doing here? I said, heroin. He said, how old are you? I said, 17. He said, do yourself a favor and don't turn 18 in a place like this. And as quick as he came, he left. He nor I had no idea the significance of that simple conversation was ever going to have on my life. Going in there for the wrong reasons, focusing on the wrong things, trying to prove a point why I can drink and drug successfully. You know what I could tell you about that gentleman? I could tell you where the 4 teeth were placed in his mouth, because at the time I had all mine. He's black. I'm white. He's 70 to 75. I'm 17. He's homeless. I live with my mother and my girlfriend. He smokes crack. My delusional alcoholic mind, the one that lies to me, my own voice that makes me believe the unbelievable, tells me I successfully do heroin. Thank God that man found the answer for which he's in search of. I'm so grateful that he found it.
And he was just a resident there? He was in treatment?
Yeah. Now, see, I'm focusing on why I don't belong there.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for the similarities. I'm looking for the differences.
Was that a little bit like looking into the future?
No, well, to me, it was like,
not at the time, right?
It was
but
like,
later?
I am in the wrong place. I don't belong here.
Okay.
You know, you're insane. All you people are insane. I'm not that guy. I'm a 17-year-old white kid from the suburbs at the time who just got off a tour with Tony Hawk, hanging out with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
That's what my alcoholic mind tells me.
Gotcha.
Right? I'm so internally unique. I'm so different that can never be me.
That's crazy, because I had a similar experience when I was in my rehab. The second day I was there, I called up my mom, and I said, Mom, and people have heard this story, but I want you to hear it. I called my mom. I said, Mom, I'm in the wrong place. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, there's people in here for meth and heroin. I'm here for Bud Light.
Yeah.
You know? And she
Totally.
goes, what are you talking about? I said, I'm just Bud Light. And she goes, son, you're in the right place. Addiction is addiction.
Yeah.
But I started, in the early infancies of rehab, I wanted to justify that I wasn't bad like everybody else.
100%.
That I was different. That this is just a mistake.
Yeah.
I don't belong
overreaction.
here.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and that happens over and over and over.
Well, you said 13 times for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I didn't have those experiences where I felt different at all 13 times, right? Because throughout time, my disease progressed, things got much worse, right? And I had ran out of options, and resources, right? No one was really running to help me.
Like you said, eventually the pain got high enough that you started to make some changes.
I became willing to do whatever.
But how long did that first treatment experience last? Like, that gentleman kind of came and thought he was helping, but you saw the opposite. You saw proof that you shouldn't be there. How long were you in that treatment center?
Well, I stayed in that facility for 30 days, but what that man did is he planted the seed.
Yeah.
He planted the seed, and here's how that story plays out real quick, if you will. So I could tell you all those things about that man.
Mm-hmm.
What I could not tell you is my therapist's name, my relapse prevention packet they're shoving down my throat, or the healthy or unhealthy boundaries you're trying to instill in me. Because if I could tell you those things, that means I can relate to being one of you people, and I want no part.
So you just shut that out.
Yeah, so I leave that treatment center, disease untreated. No defense against me or that first drink or drug. He was right. I did not turn 18 in a place like that. But I turned 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, 26, 27, 29, 30, 32, 33, 34, 35 in a jail or a treatment center. And every year I'd sit on whatever bunk of whatever cell of whatever jail I happen to be in, or whatever bed or whatever treatment center I happen to be in, and think back to myself and say, maybe if me, myself, Brandon Novak, would have listened to that man with an open mind and an open heart, I would not continuously find myself in this situation year after year after year. That was such a profound thing that he did, and at the time I laughed it off.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And there's other parts of my story that doesn't make sense for me to tell it here, where that guy is all I think about.
Yeah.
You're listening to the honest, real truth of Brandon Novack, and you're listening to Project Recovery. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Project Recovery. Brandon Novack talked about his first experience in rehab. And when did you get involved with the Jackass and the Viva La Bam whole ordeal?
So I go from being that pro skater to then deciding that it makes more sense to shoot heroin than pursue my dreams of skateboarding. So I give that away, and I become a full-blown heroin addict running the streets of Baltimore, homeless, you name it. Everything with the word less on it I had became at that point. And one day I go into a local skate shop that I would occasionally go into and hit them up for cash. And I go in this day and I said, hey, I'm trying to get some money in my normal routine. They said, we're not going to give you any money today. But Bam Margera was here with the Toy Machine team at the time, is who he rode for, doing a demo yesterday. And he asked about you, and he said, he left his number, and he said, if you ever want help, to call him. Now, see, Bam and I were best of friends, yet arch enemies when it came to this specific contest every year, meaning he would win or I would win. We were both very good contest skaters, very consistent, tricks outside the box, and we'd practice to beat each other every year. And this year he goes to the contest, and I don't show up. And my mentor, Bucky Lasik, who's from Baltimore as well, who got me sponsored by PAL, was there. And Bam went to Bucky. He said, where's Novak? And Bucky said, he's on heroin. And Bam was like, what's that? Such a young age, has no idea what that is. Fast forward to Bam excelling. Bam now creates the CKY videos, which he makes his first millions off of. Then that segues into the Viva La Bams and the Jackass. Finally, I go into the skate shop to try to get some money. They say, no money. Here's Bam's number. Call him if you want help. Cut to a few days later, I'm calling him. That's my integration or merge into Pennsylvania to attempt to get clean. When I get there, he says, look, your only job is to stay clean. If you could stay clean, meaning to him, because they couldn't grasp the concept of addiction. They have no idea. He was just trying to help his best friend out. And what clean to him was no heroin, no pills, nothing that would make me steal or fall asleep in the middle of a conversation. But drinking was totally fine, and cocaine was fine because it was socially acceptable. So as long as I stayed away from the downers, which would make me steal, do all that stuff, I could be on the TV show, I could have a car, I could use a credit card, and I could actually get paid from the show that I was on. So that was my... And
how long did you do that for?
I'd say the TV, probably about 4 years. 4 years, and in that time living there, so we would be filming all the Viva La Bam episodes, and then we would go out after we were done, after we wrapped for the day, and we'd go to a restaurant bar, and there'd be a table of cast and crew of 40 or 50 people, one big table, and Ben was always very intrigued and interested in my stories that involved heroin and the positions and places they put me in and the people that it involved. So he would always have me recite these stories. And when I would be telling these stories in these bars with 40, 50 people, you could hear a pin drop. And Bam said, the rules have changed. I said, what do you mean the rules have changed? He said, what you're going to do is you're going to write a book. Now, I had not graduated high school, was not kindly asked to leave the 10th grade for drugs and alcohol, go figure. I have no GED. I get my GED in prison after my first book is published, but that doesn't contain to this story. But I don't know how to write a book. He said, no, you're going to write a book. I am to see you with a pen and paper in your hand 24/7.
That's your new job.
Yeah, I don't care if you're writing or not. You have to have a pen and paper in your hand. The only time you don't have to have it in your hand is when you're sleeping. The moment that I don't see you with that pen and paper in hand, you're going back to Baltimore. That's it, right? And I said, well, how do you write a book? So I go to my co-author, which is a gentleman by the name of Joe Franz. I said, how do you write a book? He's a real smart guy, letters in front and behind his name. Mm-hmm. He said, a book's generally written in 12 chapters. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay. So I pen and paper wrote my whole first book. And I started my book out. I like books. I'm a big reader, and it has to come out with a bang. It has to start having and grab my attention. I was on board. So I started my book. The very first chapter was my last day doing something I swore that I would never do to obtain money to get drugs. And then it starts there. Then I get into rehab. I meet my therapist. My therapist takes me from 16 years old through conversations to the day that I walk out of treatment. And one day I go to him and I said, I think I'm finished. And he gives it, I give it to my co-author. He's like, wow, you actually did it. Bam gets me a literary agent through his publicist. They get a literary agent. They shop it around. The book gets sold. I become a published author who then becomes a New York Times selling author who had written a book on addiction. But what I forget to mention is that I wrote that book while on a large amount of cocaine and wine. So it's like, so you think I wasn't humble enough before to come into a treatment center and say, okay, maybe I don't know what I'm talking, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, but you seem to, so can you help me? Pair that with professional skateboarder at the age of 16, touring the world with Tony Hawk, hanging out with Michael Jordan, have now been in movies that break box office records several times over, paired with the fact that I'm a New York Times selling author who's written a book on addiction. My delusional alcoholic mind said, I just wrote the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Meanwhile, I wrote that on high on cocaine and wine. Do you really think I'm going to come into your facility and listen to you tell me I need to work those 12 steps? You've lost your mind.
Because you've got the Midas touch.
I'm saving people's lives. I'm literally receiving hundreds of thousands of pieces of mail from all over the world in different languages, no exaggeration. And they're saying, Novack, I read your book. I didn't want my story to get as bad as yours. I have 30 days. Novak, I read your book. I understand when my daughter picks the bottle over coming to have dinner with me on the weekends. It's not that I'm a bad mom. It says she suffers with the disease of addiction. I believe I've just solved the world's addiction problem. Paired with the fact that I possess that job that consisted of knowing everything, paired with the fact that I hate authority, I will never conform unless it becomes my idea. Good luck.
In some ways, maybe all that success was not a good thing for you?
Well, it wasn't at that point in time, but if you want to cut to the present day, right?
And that's not to say that there's real, I mean, that was evidence that what you were doing was helping people. Like, it sounds to me like you probably had, I could tell by the look on your face change when you're talking about that. There's some satisfaction there. There's some, I don't know, pride in that you were helping people, but is that dichotomy of I'm helping people are giving me positive feedback, I've done something really good, but then I could tell that you're also thinking, I'm better than everybody. I know more than everybody.
Yeah, my
right?
disease told me
that.
Absolutely.
I'm not like you guys. This is the final confirmation that I'm not like you guys.
Yeah.
Like you addicts.
Did you feel like a false prophet, I guess?
Big time.
You know.
You'll see, if you see the tomorrow at my talk, I play this 6-minute video before I come out, and part of it is me on a tour bus crying uncontrollably as Bam's holding me. And the reason that took place is because I would get off this tour bus and people would be handing me books of copies of Dream Seller to sign in different countries, and I don't understand why people would put me there when really, if you really knew me, when times get tough, I revert to standing on Eastern Avenue in Patterson Park, letting anybody buy me for money to get. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm that guy. So it's
and that was all unresolved. I mean, you were living a double life.
Yeah, it was the way. And the saddest thing was I didn't want to use. I didn't. Most of the time, I really didn't. But I couldn't not use. Because my disease, I don't know the disease from which most people possess, but the disease from which I possess, when that thing jumps, I say, yes, sir, how high? Mm-hmm. I don't have the privilege to say, you know what, I'm going to sit this out because it does not seem like a good career choice for me. That's not the disease. And I keep my story very upfront, very graphic, and very descriptive because the moment that I forget where I come from, I will return.
Yeah. That serves as a real grounding issue for you to be able to be that graphic.
I keep my past married to my present because the moment
you
that
don't
I
want to forget that.
Then all of a sudden I take credit for these things, right? And now there is no higher power in my life. And ultimately what happens is Brandon becomes Brandon's God. Brandon only sponsors Brandon, and Brandon only attends Brandon's Anonymous. And then for the life of me, like I'm getting buried in that plot that my mother had bought me 8 years ago.
You know what I find interesting about this is that you say you wrote this book and you changed lives. And I used to say when I was in my addiction that I could give great advice.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't take it, but I could give great advice because I knew what was right. I think when you wrote those words and you did change people's lives, you knew what was wrong and you were taking that from some of what was your past experiences. You just weren't buying your own advice because I imagine the stuff you were telling people to do is good, solid advice, but you just weren't taking it yourself. Do you think that's kind of true?
Well, the book, there is no real advice given. It's simply just my life. And it talks of my life. And I think really thinking about it now, processing this and having this conversation with you, it's the book really serves as just a cautionary tale. So I think the reason why people's lives may have been saved after the reading of my book is because like we do not want to become that.
I don't want to hit Brandon Novak rock bottom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like you're the Bud Light story. I'm not these guys, Mom. I'm not Brandon Novak.
Hey, my life got bad, but didn't get Brandon Novak bad.
Yeah. Well, see, and then that'll happen. I'll go to treatment centers, I'll go to these events that I throw, and I'll tell my story, and people will put their hands up and they'll say, my story wasn't as bad as yours. And they'll use that as a justification as why, like, maybe they don't belong. And I always say, I counter that with, my story was not as bad as my story either in the beginning. Right? In the beginning, it was not as bad as it had turned out to be.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of your highest highs, running next to Michael Jordan, breaking box office records. We've also talked to some of your lowest points. When did you go to the 13th rehab, and what made you decide to do that?
May 25th, 2015. So almost like 2.5 weeks ago to today. To date, I walked into my 13th facility. My worldly possessions, everything I owned, consisted of the clothes on my back. I had a bag that held 8 scarves, 2 jackets, 3 socks, 1 stick of deodorant. That bag doubled as my pillow. I had a needle, I had a spoon, a restraining order that my mother had just served me, and 4 cigarette butts that I just picked up off the ground. And what led me to walking into that facility is that the drugs literally stopped working. Every morning at that point in time, I was waking up and I was buying $180 worth of heroin and cocaine. And it was fine up to then because what would happen without fail never failed me. Every time I injected a bag of heroin or cocaine, a delusional effect was immediately produced, which would allow myself, Brandon Novack, to escape the reality that I had created for myself. Therefore, A, ignorance was bliss, and B, not only was it tolerable, it was almost desirable. It was almost welcomed, right? Because I'm living in this false reality that I have created, that heroin and cocaine have created for me upon that injection. But what do I do when I'm a 35-year-old homeless heroin addict? I just told you everything I owned. Just woke up from being on life support for 7 days, and I'm I literally can't put another drop of water in the rig because the plunger will pop out. That's how much it's loaded. Wow. And that delusional effect is no longer produced, meaning I can no longer escape the reality that I have created for myself. That moment of clarity takes place when I'm high and when I'm sober. What do you do? What do I do? I've came too far to turn back now. I want to kill myself, but I don't want to hurt myself in the process. I'm horrible at suicide because I keep waking up. I'm in a position in life where I'm so low the curve looks like a skyscraper, but yet I remember that, like, you people stay sober because every time I go back to treatment, you're there.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like, maybe I don't know what's going on. And I came to the realization walking into that 13th facility that, you know what I do know? Is that I don't know.
I say that often. At 45, I thought I'd have the world's answers. And I realized at 45, I don't have any.
The longer I stay sober, the less I know.
Right?
Really?
One thing I want to clarify. Did you go into that 13th facility of your own accord, or did somebody
begging
take you?
And pleading?
So that's
begging.
How different is
Gift
that than
of
all the other?
desperation.
Yeah,
I had became willing, became my idea.
right.
I had met the God of my understanding as a direct result of that gift of desperation. If you would have told me to do, this is I have to be like family oriented on this show, but if you would have told me to do anything, I would have been more than happy and willing to do it. Why? Because like it would promise me a couple more hours of sobriety. I was willing to, and it was my idea. And guess what? I've excelled at a rapid pace. God willing, in a few weeks, I'll have 4 years sober. I have not had the desire to pick up a drink or drug one time in my sobriety.
That's
not
amazing.
once. I've been an IV heroin and cocaine user for 20 years straight. 1 year of incarceration was I free from addiction, so that was by force, not by choice.
Right.
24 years, smoked, sniffed, drank, and ate. You name it, I did it to try to lift myself of the desire, rid me of the obsession to use. I'd moved to Amsterdam. I'd moved to Finland. I had moved to Paris. I changed women, homes, careers all over the United States until I had that spiritual experience from me that came through the 12 steps. That was the only thing that had ever worked for me. And I continued. They told me in the beginning, they said, kids, stick to the basics, so God willing, you don't have to go back to the basics. So I don't get lost in the accessories of shit, man. I keep it real simple.
Yeah.
I get up in the morning, I ask God, I thank Him, I experience the steps, I have a sponsor, I have sponsees, just...
Well, that's amazing. I find a lot of times with people, the word we use in psychology is oppositional. Both of you guys are describing being oppositional, which is when somebody tells you to do something, you push back. Mm-hmm. But what I've also found is that when a person can flip that a 180, and when they, like you said, make it their own idea, or when they're dedicated to a cause, then they become some of the most determined, hardworking people that create some amazing things in their lives. And it sounds to me like it wasn't until you had done that flip in your mind, that 180 in your mind, that now you were on the other side. You were begging to get into there, begging to get the treatment and now you've excelled at that.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it became very attractive, very appealing.
And I've said that forever about people who skateboard. You watch these kids skateboard, and they'll do a trick 1,000 times. I've watched some of my kids in the driveway do a trick 1,000 times until they get it.
Yeah.
And that's impressive. That's that determination.
Yeah.
And when you can focus that on something that changes your life in a positive, healthy way, it's the same principle as skating. It's the same principle as making a movie, doing a shot over and over and over again until you get it right. But now you had it focused on yourself.
Yeah, and so now what my life looks like today, right? And all from me just getting out of my own way, right? I take no credit for anything, but now like I just quit smoking October 4th, right? So I'm smoke free. I don't even smoke cigarettes.
That's great.
I just ran a 5K. I'm in the gym 5 days a week. I work out with a trainer 2 of those days. I've just purchased my first home. I just learned how to write checks 2 years ago. I'm a productive member of society. I'm a productive tax-paying member of
So
society.
you're with the 80-year-old still writing checks? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Do you have a coin purse?
Slow down, killer. I just learned this, for Christ's sake.
You got a coin purse? Hey, you're listening to Brandon Novack as he tells his story on his road to recovery. Coming up in episode 2, we're going to find out what he's doing next and how he's helping out people along the way. You're listening to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. That's John Smith. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.